Yes, I got to QUBE the following way. I was on my way to be a consultant or a producer or something at AM Los Angeles. And I was literally getting on a plane, and Mike Fields called me, the wonderful Mike Fields, who I love. And I said, well, I can't come to Columbus. You got to come to Columbus. You got to. You're not going to believe what's going on here. You got to come. We'll arrange the ticket. You'll stop, and then you go to LA. All right. So, you didn't say no to him because he'd kill you. I mean, he literally would kill you. So I did. And and this is complete coincidence, they took me to the Ohio State Fair. I think Mike knew this. He would have had to know this. And at the Ohio State Fair, appearing in a big pavilion sponsored by Wendy's, is Buffalo Bob, Clarabelle, and the whole Howdy Doody gang, who I knew very well and were probably one of the biggest influences I had in television as a kid. So they take me to this pavilion, and there's Bob, who sees me, and we're old friends and blah, 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 and I don't think I ever left Columbus. I never went to that LA thing. I stayed there. They offered me, I think I was making $17,500, I think, something like that. I don't remember, something like that. I stayed, and happily, I stayed. And before, I was at the Mike Douglas show, before QUBE, and I did all the comedians on the Mike Douglas show, and which was wonderful for me to, do all that, and then ended up in a tremendous argument with the executive producer of that show, and that exploded. But that was okay. I stayed there for a year and a half, 2 years. Then I had my own company, and we produced live shows. My first job was WLS in Chicago, where I did 2 talk shows, Kennedy and Company, and a show called Howard Miller's Chicago. But talk, and I would have to say, the word today is reality, was important to me. That was what, to keep it real, make it real. Today, reality is not real. The talk shows are real. Yeah, well, as I said earlier, the word interactive, we coined. Did QUBE change the world? I only think it changed the world in the sense that we that did QUBE used the tools that we learned there later in television. But I don't think it changed the world because we weren't allowed to be there long enough. I think had we been there long enough, but here, let's talk real quickly about, well, let me tell you this story because it's an important story. And I don't know that you know the story. I was asked to fly out to LA in the middle of bananas. We were doing well. And there was a gentleman that ran Warner Electric Asylum named Mickey Katz. And do you remember the name? And they said, Mickey Katz is going to show you around. That's great. Remember, no commercials on bananas or anything back then. So Mickey Katz picked me up and took me all around and took me all through Warner Electric Asylum and the buildings. And I remember walking down the hall, and he was opening up doors, and he opened up one door, and there was a big room there with all these tapes. And I said, what's that? That nothing. We use these things for record promotions in record stores. It's okay. And he explained what they were, and that was it. And we kept going. I eventually got back on a plane, was flying back to Columbus, and I couldn't get that out of my mind. And I went back and I called Mickey, and I said, Mickey, those tapes, what are they? And he said, well, like if, I think of the groups, Queen or Emerson, Lake and Palmer, if they sign autographs, then we have these little tapes that we put on the monitors, and it's just background. I said, could I get those? And he said, well, why would you want them? I said, we have no commercials. We have no way to cut out of the studio. Is there any way, if I could just say, now here's Queen, or have Michael say, now here's Queen singing so-and-so, or Randy Hamilton saying, now here's Emerson Lake, let alone trying to get these people in the studio live, that would be great also. He said, let me check the contracts. So he checked the contracts, and there was nothing in those contracts back then that said that you couldn't do that. So 2 weeks later, boxes come to my office, boxes of these videos. And I remember grabbing the whole staff and telling them, we've got these videos of Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Queen and this one and that one. And, Michael's going to say, blah, blah, blah. And now here's Emerson, Lake and Palmer singing so-and-so. And during those 2 minutes, we can regroup in the studio because there are no commercials. This will be great. We could take a breath. So we did. And we started playing these things and playing these things. And one day I get a call from John Lack, who was then running QUBE. And he brings me into his office. He says, sit down. I sit down. He says to me, where did you get these tapes that you're running? And I immediately think, I'm fired. I'm in deep trouble here. And I said, well, Mickey Katz gave them to me from Warner Electra Asylum. And he said contractually, I'm making up, so I think I'm in trouble. He said, you're not in trouble. I just want to know where you got them. So I told him. And he had apparently been watching because he started to list these groups that we were showing. And, I mean, it was great when we first did it. We'd show a tape, and then, Michael, the staff, and I would look at each other like, wow, we got 2 minutes now. What are we going to do? We'll just sit around. It was because we had no way to stop. So anyway, John looked at me and said to me, let me ask you a question. I said, yeah. He said, do you think there's anything with a station or a channel with just these videos? And I, in my brilliance, I believe I said, I don't know. I don't know. Well, MTV. There are other people that get that credit. There's one particular person, I'm not going to mention names, who gets the credit for starting MTV. John Lack was the one, I don't know if you know that story. He was the one and came right to me and then went to Warner, and I believe the rest is history. And funny, years later, when I was doing the Sally Jesse Raphael show, on one side of the wall was the Sally show, and the other side of the wall was MTV, when they had the VJs and all those people. So I've always wanted to tell that story because it's absolutely true, and I don't believe that John Lack got the credit that he deserved. I don't believe so, but that's where it came from.